What fools they are who manufacture idols for their gods. Their hopes remain unanswered. They themselves are witnesses that this is so, for their idols neither see nor know. No wonder those who worship them are so ashamed. Who but a fool would make his own god, an idol that can help him not one whit? All that worship these will stand before the Lord in shame, along with all these carpenters, mere men who claim that they have made a god. Together they will stand in terror. Such stupidity and ignorance. God has shut their eyes so that they cannot see, and closed their minds from understanding. The man never stops to think or figure out why. It's just a block of wood. I've burned it for heat and used it to bake my bread and roast my meat. How can the rest of it be a god? Should I fall down before a chunk of wood? The poor deluded fool feeds on ashes. He is trusting what can never give him any help at all. Yet he can never bring himself to ask, is this thing, this idol that I'm holding in my hand, a lie? You know, my mom told me a story in the last century or so, in which apparently the devil had challenged God and said, you know what, I can get more souls on my side than you can get on your side. And God, in a very Book of Job fashion, said, okay, give it your best shot. I'll give you 100 years. Go ahead and try. And that was apparently the last century. And so in that last century, leading up to now, we see the results of that story and how well or well not the devil did. And I gotta tell you, with today's discussion topic, the devil took a totally different direction than he did in the Book of Job. Hello everyone, my name is Scandalous, and I am a Christian witch content creator, writer, educator, specifically a writer of this book right here, Discovering Christian Witchcraft, which, if you saw the words Christian and witch and had a very understandable moment of confusion, I got you. This book explains what we talk about when we talk about Christian witchcraft, what witchcraft is in a modern context versus biblical ones, what all of the verses you're no doubt Googling right now have to say about it, and a lot more. If you don't want to grab a book right now, though, that's totally fine. All you gotta do is go ahead and like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell button so you get notifications, because we do post a video here every single Friday. Oop. And this is also my pigeon Bilok, who is a very goofy little man. And so if you hear any hooblin' and dooblin', it be him. And if you want to get these videos 2 weeks early and ad-free, remember all you gotta do is hop over to my Patreon, where I post these videos and a whole lot more. And this week we are talking about my review of this book right here, The Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory, American Evangelicals in an Age of Extremism by Tim Alberta. Now, Tim Alberta is a political journalist and someone who grew up in the evangelical church, and especially by this writing, still very much believes in that institution and its capacity for goodness, for people's ability to, have a strong faith and strong community and strong, organizing values without going down the train that it seems a lot of modern Western American, specifically Christianity, has gone down. I saw this on the shelf at Barnes & Noble, thought it was a really cool idea, wanted to know what it was about, and found a copy at my local library. And if I'm going to be 100% honest with you, I still have like this much of the book left to actually read. I did kind of flip through it and skim to make sure I wasn't missing anything super important, but I've read this much, and I could tell you that this is pretty much more of the same of this, just in like a slightly different theme, and that overall, this book is crazy. As a brief overview of this book, basically what it is Tim Alberta going around and doing some serious political journalism across the country and even a little bit out of the country to get a different perspective, an insider's perspective on what the hell is going on with the evangelical church. So it's split into 3 parts as well. First part being kingdom, second part being power, third part being glory, which is an interesting way to divide it. Basically, how it's actually divided is by the history of, the evangelical rise to power, right? The background in the last century between, kind of 50s and 60s movements leading into the moral majority in the 80s. And that itself goes into some pretty interesting figures, right? We have Jerry Falwell Sr. and Jr. of what is now Liberty University being discussed and actively interviewed. We see also some of their, I guess, I don't know if I would say victims, but definitely like burned colleagues and burned partners appear in here. And we just get this completely different perspective of the machinery that worked so hard to fight back against the, radical left or, just Democrats and whoever else is killing American culture and destroying American Christianity and making Christianity out to be some terrible thing that you're not allowed to do anymore. Naturally, a lot of these sentiments about Christianity being persecuted or otherwise, not cherished, not respected, not valued, come from living in a society where civil rights of all kinds, right, from all the way to the actual civil rights movement, anti-segregation movement, into, right, like gay rights, women's rights, and everything else, are apparently a threat to Christianity's existence in the country, which in itself already sure does tell us a lot, right? And at one point, though, in fact, before that, a lot of Christians felt that church and politics should be completely separate, that you shouldn't talk about politics in church, that you shouldn't do any of these kinds of things, that you shouldn't, support one party or the other. They're just that you should focus on Christian values and vote according to whatever those are. Oh boy. However, of course, you had a lot of pastors who are not God, right? So they are not perfect, nor are they infallible, and therefore these often white, straight, male, Republican pastors, they would go around railing against the civil rights movement, railing against all these issues that were being brought up, right? Saying like, well, why should churches be unsegregated? Why should any of this happen? What does this have to do with us? We shouldn't be bothering with civil rights and politics. That doesn't matter because we're about God's kingdom. And all that sure does highlight how, of course, the group that is the most socially powerful, right, white, straight, Republican, Christian men, they don't think they have to be political because issues that affect other people don't affect them. And this is something that this book points out, right? How at this time, black churches, they were saying, hey, fellow Christians, please stand with us, help us get the dignity and equity we deserve as fellow Christians, as humans, and all these other things. And they were not finding a lot of purchase for a long time with this denomination, right? So it really goes into that kind of almost Jesus and John Wayne-esque kind of background with these different interviews and all of this different history about these figures that kind of started this, for lack of better words, descent into hell of this denomination. The power part is actually gut-churning, sickening, and horrible. And I don't doubt for Tim Alberta it was as well. And in fact, he says as much as he goes around interviewing the people who spawned out of that first kind of more historical bit. The people who realized that they could make a lot of money and get a lot of fame and get a lot of political connections by stirring their congregations into fear and frenzy and hatred and mobilize them to vote for people who, whether or not they actually had anything to do with exemplifying Christian values, were at least on the right side, and that was apparently good enough for them. And this has helped get people elected like Nixon, like Reagan, like Bush, like Trump, all to preserve American culture and preserve Christian traditional values, whatever the hell that even means at this point. And we're talking a lot of names. A lot of names come up in this book. We got a lot of different people saying a lot of different things about how they're moving and what they're doing and what they're supporting and how they're operating. And one of the most striking quotes to me, honestly, was when a former moral majority official, Cal Thomas, another political writer, he left, he rebuked the whole thing and wrote a book about why actually they made a big mistake doing this in 1991. And he was talking about how some of the fundraisers they were doing they were always sharing these messages of fear, right? Sowing this embattlement, right? This sense that we're under attack and only you can help. We need your help. We need your help. Donate money now. And that was keeping all these donations to churches and other political initiatives running. And Cal Thomas said, why don't you ever tell our people the good things you're doing with our money? Like, why don't you send a positive message? And the fundraiser just sat there and said, you can't get money on positivity. You have to scare people. So that's a little bit of what goes on in the power, leading all the way up into today. And luckily, the last part and the glory, right? The glory part. This I did again. I didn't read all of it, but I did read a good bit of it, enough to know that the whole point of this book, again, as I said, is that this is not what just Protestant Christianity used to be. This is not what it has to be. And there are a lot of people out there who are trying to push back on this situation. Not easily, not well, right? In fact, this book kind of starts painting a picture of none other than Tim Alberta's own dad, who ran his own church called Cornerstone, and who, you know, when he died suddenly and unfortunately, he was taken over by a pastor that they had chosen that was a really nice, like, soft-spoken, really all about the gospel guy. And that guy was basically getting just pummeled by the congregation, who somewhere along the way had become radicalized and who stopped wanting a church sermon and instead wanted a Trump rally. And that seems to be the case for pastors everywhere. And so now there are folks like Russell Moore, the president of the Southern Baptist Convention, and David French, and all these other people working together to try and push back on what seems to have been a serious case of cult behavior and idolatry that has cropped up in the church. And that idolatry is, as you might imagine, with this book having the American flag in the church, that is an idolatry of this country. And that is something that the more I read the book, the more just appalled I became to see it across many, many ways. So I definitely recommend this book, just like I recommend Jesus and John Wayne. This is so eye-opening and enlightening. And I just want to share a few of my takeaways after reading it and just digesting all of that insanity. And let me preface all this by saying that me and America, we don't have a bad relationship, but we don't have a crazy obsessive one either. I live here. I like where I live. There's a lot of things about America that I enjoy, but the last thing I'm going to do is go ahead and hitch Jesus on the cross to that American flag. And it seems like that is exactly what a lot of evangelical Christianity has done. In fact, it was shocking to me. Tim Alberta was talking to some of these bigwigs behind these political, events and fundraisers to, promote, I believe it was Donald Trump, and he was saying, like, hey, well, I mean, all this about America and gotta fight for America, like, Jesus says the kingdom of heaven isn't on earth, it's in heaven. And some lady that was there, she's like, no, the kingdom is here. It's America. Hi, in this entire book, where do you see America being mentioned even once? A lot of these people have conflated the Christian mission with American empire, and that's kind of insane to see. But it's so obvious when we talk about things like, Turning Point USA, when we talk about the moral majority and all these other things, these people want to insert their idea of Christian values over everyone else, no matter what crooked tactics they have to do that. And so, they go from crucifying Bill Clinton for the whole Monica Lewinsky situation, which, I mean, okay, fair enough, right? And they go saying, hey, that's not appropriate behavior for a president. Okay, fair enough, right? But then they do a complete, 180 into supporting Trump and saying, well, whatever. He's not a perfect man, but God can work through imperfect people, and that's okay. And it becomes a situation where power is more important than faith, where, as it says in the book, where winning by vice is better than losing with virtue, and where these people are over-invested in what they think is the country's health and well-being, because they're conflating America with God's kingdom. It reminds me an awful lot of, the whole debacle in Exodus when God goes away for like 5 minutes, and in that time they decide to build themselves a new god, that golden calf, while they're all waiting, for Moses to come back, if he's ever going to come back, because at that point they don't know. What? It feels like something similar has happened here, where the kingdom of heaven is kind of far away and imperceivable to these people, so they went and they made their own kind of like sand castle in the dirt and called that a castle with a kingdom instead. And funnily enough, honestly, one of my biggest takeaways is that single issues like abortion have single-handedly dragged American evangelicals straight to hell. Actually, a lot of people, Catholics and everyone else, straight to hell, right? Because these people, they then think that their witness, their Christian witness and testimony and all that depends on what party they're serving, and also what single issue they're voting against. So they're voting to criminalize abortion all over the place, overturn Roe v. Wade and whatever. And as our boy Alberta points out, not only did that not make abortion go away forever, it actually made it worse. Because without the federal regulation of Roe v. Wade, yeah, sure, a lot of states rushed to try and ban it, but a lot of other states went to go even crazier with their openness to, abortion rules and how long and how late and how, when and where and why you're able to get one. To be patently clear, I am pro-choice. Always have been, always will be. There will always be these things. There will always be this procedure, because without it, women will die. The same fucking scriptures that people use to justify being pro-life, I can go ahead and use to justify being pro-choice too. Using the Bible to justify any position you have is bound to be a shit fit unless that position is that the poor should be fed and housed and clothed and that the sick should be healed. If that is your only position, good. Any position outside of that, you get in the muddy waters. Still though, right? Even though I'm pro-choice, you want to lower abortion rates? Sure, I'll get behind that. I'll help you do that. It's not going to be by just making it illegal. It's going to be by actually, and this is where Alberta honestly seems like a really cool, down-to-earth, level-headed guy. It's going to be what Alberta says, which is actually providing supports, providing programs, providing actual aid and social safety nets to people that would otherwise abort their child. And so while I can appreciate that people like Alberta at least can recognize the problem, right? Can recognize that these people show up to ban abortion, but certainly as hell ain't adopting any babies, doing anything else. Again, this is where we have to stop talking about voting by your values and start talking about the fact that this world kind of sucks. It's not perfect. Bad things happen. And you have to be able to vote in a way that actually helps the most amount of people, not in a way that you think and your pastors blindly tell you is anywhere in line with this. My fiance made me an espresso martini, or margarita? I don't know, it's got tequila. Still though, notice how with Tim, right, despite the fact that he seems to be more pro-life, I seem to be more pro-choice, I can work with him. I can understand where he's coming from. And I agree with him about a lot of things, namely why this whole bullshit that the church keeps pushing is failing. And that's because Tim is still a reasonable person, and these people, per the thesis of the book, do still exist. And that they're trying to build up this coalition to help pastors who are just at a loss of what to do with this weird political landscape where this Trumpism has just whipped people into a frenzy. They're trying to figure out how to navigate that and fight back and actually restore Christianity to what it's supposed to be, which is nothing to do with the American flag. Because if Russell Moore, ex-president of the Southern Baptist Convention, is considered woke and far left now, oh boy, we are in trouble. But in this, really, one big topic that has to come into conversation is the topic of idolatry. On this channel, we've talked a few times about the evangelical egregore, but upon reading this book and reading about how, honestly, these people will take any allies of any denomination, of any faith, of any lack of faith, right? They have anti-woke atheists on their side. They have, Catholics and anyone who they would otherwise disparage. They'll pull on their side in a minute if they can tokenize them and make them work for their agenda. And that agenda, again, is to make Jesus into an American hero, much like the whole concept of Jesus and John Wayne. And I call this the evangelical egregore because it seemed like it was really rooted in the evangelical church, but it does seem to be a poison that can affect all denominations. And so maybe it's better to call this the American egregore or the nationalist egregore. I've seen, I mean, granted, it's the internet, so, right, that might not be a picture of, like, real people, but, like, I've seen people from all kinds of countries suddenly double down on all kinds of weird nationalism and stitch Christianity or the Vatican flag or any of these other things to it. And it really does just show that people are not interested in the actual gospel. People aren't interested in the actual word of God. They're interested in whatever they can use to justify the positions, beliefs, and hard-heartedness that they already hold. The constant attempt to rewrite and force America to be a Christian nation, historically and now in modernity, is nothing other than a bald display of idolatry, where people think that their God has something to do with a specific nation, or a specific race, or a specific social structure. And in reality, God's kingdom has nothing to do with anything on this earth. This earth, Jesus tells us again and again, is a flawed place, is a place that's going to give us nothing but grief, and is something we shouldn't expect a lot from. So for so many, Americans to fall into the lie that they need to defend Christianity in America is insane. And what's disgusting is the amount of pundits and grifters who are out here scapegoating, fear-mongering, doing everything they can to squeeze money out of these hapless people. To squeeze money out of these hateful people. There's not many ways I can really say it, you know? There's not many ways I can express this concept just because it is so obvious. You know, it's so obviously wrong what's going on here, and I have been grieved this entire week thinking about it. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it because I am so injured that the name of my God is being used to justify some of the worst behavior, some of the worst ideology that is being used to excuse some of the worst behavior and some of the worst ideology. Take, for example, Herschel Walker, who they were all rallying behind just because he was a Republican and he was going to be on the right side of the abortion issue, while meanwhile he had threatened his ex-wife and the one son out of 4 that he recognizes, and also made multiple of his girlfriends have abortions. Because he was anti-choice, they all rallied behind him. Because he was a Republican and not a Democrat, they all rallied behind him. And again, this book right here, it says a lot of stuff. This book has a lot of content written by a lot of people over many, many, many thousands of years. You can pretty much get this book to say anything you want if you cut it up just right and you paraphrase a certain way, or you splice verses together, or you do whatever you want. Case in point, right, I saw this video, which was a good video. This video, I agreed with 100%, this one right here.
Well, some people are abusing the system to buy soda. You got baptized last month, and you're still watching them videos last night. You got baptized by the blood, by the water. Your sins have been washed away from you, and yet you still gossip, and you haven't forgiven your brother, which is akin to murder, according to the words of Jesus. But you want to empty a system. You want to take all the money away from people who rely on it to live because some people abuse it. Thank God that he is not the same way with his grace. Because otherwise, not a dang one of us would have hope for salvation. God bless, my friend.
But as I was looking through the comments of that video, which is, of course, a bad habit of mine, waste a lot of time, I saw this comment in which this person decided to use 2 lines in the entire Bible and not even use them in proper context, not even use them correctly, to say that what this person was saying, this basic demonstration of like biblical literacy and understanding of the gospel, was too liberal. And therefore completely ignoring all the parts of the Bible where those who don't have any work and don't have any home still have ways to eat per commandment of the Lord. Where wealth and hoarding wealth is looked down on, is actively condemned. Where Jesus himself is one of the ones who benefits from that those laws that allow for the poor to pick at grains left in the fields because he is poor. Instead of using the Bible as a North Star to remind us constantly to open our hearts to others, have grace for others, love one another, do everything we can to support one another, they use it as a weapon to justify their complacency and their laziness and their just complete apathy towards their fellow man. And that's incorrigible. That's horrible. You can't even reconcile that in a Christian worldview, in a real Christian worldview. And with all this talk of restoring, American culture and Christian values, it's always interesting how the values these people never vote for are the ones that Jesus actually professed. Every time you have some situation where people want to, put up taxes so that they can use that money to feed children and people, to provide social safety nets and supports, this is decried as some horrible communist plot by the very people who are going to throw out that give unto Caesar's what is Caesar's line. Instead, they'd rather, again, vote for those single issues, those like abortion, or like, banning fucking whatever they want to ban, I don't know, books in libraries or some stupid shit, instead of actually doing anything that would be helpful to people, and instead of doing anything that Jesus would actually care about. And the thing about that is that on top of that, Jesus in the Gospels, he's not only portrayed as someone who sits with the sinners, who shows grace to everyone, and especially brings close to him those who traditional and, upright society consider impure and worthless. He also is not a warrior. He's not portrayed as a warrior. He willingly goes with the Roman governors and all of them to get crucified. He does not fight back. But time and time again in this book, we see these people who Alberta's interviewing. They say, well, we don't need a soft guy right now, right? They don't like Mike Pence anymore because even though he's a nice guy, honorable guy, even though he's a honorable Christian, he's too soft. We don't need a soft guy. We need a warrior. But that's precisely the thing. No, you don't. No, you don't. If you want to protect your Christian values, you also have to recognize that other people have their own values that they are more than able to protect. You stop protecting Christian values the moment you start legislating other people outside of you. And that's something that somehow along the way has just been completely thrown out the door. As a bisexual person, if you don't think that, gay marriage is a good thing, okay, what am I going to do? Hold a gun to your head? Absolutely not.
What does God say is the answer, is the solution for the homosexual in 2022, here in the New Testament, here in the book of Romans, that they are worthy of death?
But why on earth would you want to come invade my business, invade my space, if I decided one day to go marry a woman? It has nothing to do with you. What is so Christian about forcing people to abide by your values that other people do not share? But they don't see it that way because, again, they're tying Christianity to the flag. They're tying it to the flag. They're tying Jesus' death and resurrection. They're tying this very cross to the flag of one nation. As if that nation has anything to do with God. As if that any nation has anything to do with God. They, instead of seeing Jesus as their Savior, of which they are a part of, as the body of Christ, being part of the communion of the church, they instead make Jesus into a mascot. They make him into a mascot, and they just kind of prop him up like a scarecrow to mask every horrible thing they believe, think, and do. And that is how the egregore has spawned. That is how the egregore, especially rife in the evangelical church, has flourished. Because fear is powerful, and anger and hatred are so very pungent. Deep, deep wells of energy. And this egregore feeds on all of it like a tick feeding on blood. This egregore has no love for the crucified Christ, for the Christ that Jürgen Moltmann talks about. This egregore has no love for the God who became man in order to stand with the people who were wronged on this earth. That's not powerful. That doesn't win votes. That doesn't protect American hegemony. These people out here, while professing Christ, go ahead and tie him to the same empire that killed him. I have been mortified to see just the depth in which my God, the name of my God, the image of my God, the concept of my God has been used to justify everything he ever stood against. There are so many parts of the Bible that talk about how we need to destroy our idols. And this is one of those points where we really need to realize that we can't tie God to a flag, to a nation, to a history, to a concept. That when we start getting to the point that people ask about hanging up American flags in churches, it's time to do what God commanded to do and go and tear down that idol. All in all, I found this book actually wonderful. I thought that Alberta was a masterful storyteller, and despite that some of this, a lot of this, I guess, historical information isn't the most riveting stuff, right? It's historical information, usually tends to be kind of dry. The way he tells these stories, the way he humanizes people, the way he calls back to previous interviews and brings them back when it's relevant, the way he sets up the kind of dramatic entrance of some of them is powerful. It makes you keep reading because it's reading a compelling narrative rather than just reading bare history. And that is, just on a craft level, something I really admire Alberta for. He is a clear, concise, and yet very gripping writer. Someone who can just, it's like talking to a friend the way he writes, and it's wonderful. But I definitely recommend, if you want to understand how Christianity has just gotten fucked up, and at least get a little bit of hope that people are coming back to fix it, I definitely recommend this book. It is eye-opening as much as it is heartbreaking, as much as it is infuriating, as much as it is rallying. And in fact, another takeaway I have about this book is just the way in which I came to feel camaraderie with figures that I never thought I would. I mean, again, Russell Moore, ex-president of the Southern Baptist Church. Never in all my life would I think that I would be snapping my fingers saying amen to anything this man was saying, because, as even Alberta acknowledges, he is your very cookie-cutter, standard, white, straight, conservative Christian man. He still retains the core message of Christianity, which is love and grace. And the reason he was ex-president of Southern Baptist Convention, the reason he is not still the president, is because, again, they pushed him out for being far left and woke because he wouldn't kowtow to Trump and Trumpism. That's insane. And I'll end this by reading you a little bit of Isaiah. There were actually two different kinds of scriptures that could have been read today on the, I think, 22nd week after Pentecost. And the fact that they came up this week was actually insane. It was crazy, right? The first one being from Habakkuk. We have a line that says, "Look at the proud, their spirit is not right within them, but the righteous live by their faithfulness." That's the first one. But the second one that could have been read was from Isaiah. And in that part from Isaiah, it says this, right? "Listen, you leaders of Israel, you men of Sodom and Gomorrah, as I call you now. Listen to the Lord. Hear what he is telling you. I am sick of your sacrifices. Don't bring me any more of them. I don't want your fat rams. I don't want to see the blood from your offerings. Who wants your sacrifices when you have no sorrow for your sins? The incense you bring me is a stench in my nostrils. Your holy celebrations of the new moon and the Sabbath and your special days for fasting, even your most pious meetings, are all frauds. I want nothing more to do with them. I hate them all. I can't stand the sight of them. From now on, when you pray with your hands stretched out to heaven, I won't look or listen. Even though you make many prayers, I will not hear, for your hands are those of murderers. They are covered with the blood of your innocent victims." And that is where I think I can pull a sentiment that I felt a long time ago, that I heard a long time ago. And that sentiment was that when it came between the law and the people, God said to hell with the law. And by that, I think that means when it came between all the right steps, all the right virtuous signals that you are holy and good, the sacrifices, the fasting, the prayers, all of that means nothing to God if you are not actively out there trying to help your fellow man. If you are going to snatch the food out of your neighbor's mouth, if you are going to burn the roof over their head and tear the clothes from their body, none of your performative pious acts matter to God. And that is what we're seeing in this book. We're seeing people who say God's name over and over and over again, but who have nothing to do with them. And you can tell by their actions and by the very nature of their thoughts, their actions, their speech, their deeds, their heart. With all that said, I will see you guys next time for some more good chats, but I can't recommend this book enough. It is crazy, and it really does. It just helps. It's one of those kind of bridging the gap books that I think everyone should read. So, cheers, and I'll see you next time.